Off the Wall Productions is proud to present Voices of the Methow. This is a series of conversations with interesting folk in and around the valley. On December 19th, 2018, Randy Lewis, a Wenatchee tribal descendant, and historian and author Bill Layman spoke at a presentation promoting their new book, Red Star, Blue Star Defeats Spexmen, given at the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center. Bill spoke and gave a slide presentation showing the collaboration of the museum with local native tribes and their heritage. Randy shared some background of the local tribes, particularly the Wenatchee, and the geology of the area, relating it to the new book, which is an ancient legend. The book, Red Star, Blue Star Defeats Spexman, has been funded by the Native River Fund of the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center. You can pick up a copy of the book at the museum gift shop. I recorded Randy's portion of the presentation, and Randy and Bill have graciously given me permission to share this. Randy is going to start off introducing himself, some of his relatives, give some history of the area, and share some of the memories of his father and grandfather before telling the tale of Spexmen.
Randy Lewis.
My name is Randy Lewis. I am the great-great-grandson of Samuel Miller, one of the founders of the city of Wenatchee, Miller Street. For a portion of my life, I grew up on Wenatchee Heights. It was during that period of 1955 through 1961 that I became very familiar, with the help of my grandfather, Jerome Miller, my grandmother, Agnes Miller, my auntie, Lucy Nason Walsh, Grandma Ida Nason, Veronica. You have to understand Native families. We're a part of a huge extended family. And we're kind of connected on all four corners, as it was. We're related going back the Wenatchee and Pascosa and Tiat and Tilan. You can't separate them. The people from Wenatchee were directly related to all of them. So I guess you could say we were a tribe with bands. The Moses Columbia people from out here, out on the plateau. Well, when you're a little kid, and around here, there's a lot to see. All the rock formations that people go by and drive by, those are our Sistine chapels. Those are our St. Peter's Basilica. It is our Mecca. It is our Jerusalem that we're talking about here. When the first when they first came into this area, I used that kind of lightly, but when they first came into this area, this was a very, very well-occupied area. Rock Island, the island itself, which stretches for about 3/4 of a mile by 5/8 of a mile, there were 800 people who lived on that island, who lived permanently on the island. Another 1,600 over here at Rock Island Creek, another 800 at Squilchuck, then in Squequias, Wenatchee proper. There were another scattered through here, another 3,200 up to the confluence. So you start getting an idea. This was not a desolate, thinly populated area. Our mountain there, Badger Mountain, that's where all our roots are. It's one of the most sacred places for our people. Rock Island. Rock Island is the heart. If you see a picture, an aerial view, it looks like a human heart. Not the little Valentine's heart, but the human heart. And that's what it was to us. That's what it is to us now. Bill talks about when they arrived here, when they first came here, wondering, where were the people? Where are they? Where is the native people? Where is the native presence? Where are the people that this town is named after, this city? Well, I'll tell you, when the first treaty negotiators came in In 1853, stretching from what is now Rock Island Creek or Rock Island north, there were between 14 and 16,000 in that one encampment. 30 years later, there was 150 of us left. That's how thorough. And I'm not going to say that it was overt genocide. I'm not going to say that it was, just unmindful killing. The tsunami of death that was unleashed by diseases that came through here, killing and leaving standing vacant entire cities. From the mouth of the Columbia North, it was repeated over and over. Malaria came in, and the Chinook people perished from the malaria that was carried in the hulls. The malaria mosquitoes was carried in the hulls of the ships that were coming in. Followed by Gabriel Francharier, French Jesuit, who came in and brought with him a huge epidemic of measles, of smallpox. It decimated the population, especially those areas that were sedentary people, where the villages were. Spring forward a few more years. Gold is discovered. Beaver, the British North American Fur Company, the Hudson Bay Company. They all kind of, in their own way, conspired against us because they brought with them the same pathogens and more. They brought the disease of greed. They brought with them guns to turn against their neighbors. It was a battle for land. Those few Wenatchees that still existed here, they were driven out. The Inpascosa people were driven out, and if they did not leave, they were murdered, like up on the White River here. There's a legacy here. You ask where people are here, where the Wenatchees are, they were driven out of here. A lot of them moved to the Moses-Columbia Tract, which was a reservation, a 3.5 million acre reservation, which stretched from the Cascade Crest to the Okanagan River, from Canada down to Lake Chelan. And then right adjacent to them, the Colville Indian Reservation. All told, about 17.5 million acres at that time. Second to the largest reservation in the United States at that time. Land-hungry pioneers demanded more land. Gold-hungry prospectors demanded more area to prospect. And so, little by little, we were driven out. They were driven out, they were displaced. Spring forward. In the 1920s, my grandfather, Jerome Miller, would come down with his father, Sam Miller. They would come down and they would fish Rock Island. Right behind it, Moses Coulee. All these places had really special meaning to my grandfather. He said when he first went there was a little crescent-shaped bar on the east side of the island where it was sandy. Well, the crescent shape there was the basalt, and all along that were the petroglyphs. And he would lay there and he would sleep at night. He said because it never got cold, it stayed warm because the sun would heat up the basalt and it would radiate back at night on him. When he was a teenager, he was laying there. He heard the sounds, he heard singing, he heard voices. All of a sudden it was joined from the other side. And all along there, he said, as the rocks heated, then cooled, it was releasing sounds from the rocks. Voices were coming out from the rocks, people's voices. He could hear them, he could understand them. He said it was the voices of 1,000 years, of 10,000 years speaking. I told a friend of mine, an archaeologist in Bellingham, and he said, well, rocks are like tuning forks. Crystals are like tuning forks. They capture sound and they hold it. At the right time, under the right circumstances, those sounds are released again. They're like a crystal condenser. So what he was hearing was the voices that had been captured for thousands of years by the people who had lived there, their songs. The petroglyphs, they're sacred. They're sacred in that they're the stories. They're the foundation. Carved into the pillars, the basalt pillars. Those are like the pillars of our faith. They're the pillars of our beliefs. They hold up our world. It truly was the heart of our people. And he would sit there and listen to them at night, he said. And he would wake up feeling totally refreshed. He said it was like it was cleansing me, it was cleaning me. There was something holy about that. He would go down to the other end of the island, and there on the other end of the island, there's a rock that kind of arcs. You can't see it now because it's inundated by the lake, by the reservoir. But he would sit on that, and he would spear the salmon. He would gaff the salmon. He said, and you wouldn't believe what it was like when you would spear a 90-pound salmon, how strong they are. He said, it took a lot, he said, and his brother would be down there, and he said, I had to be mindful of what I was doing because his younger brother, Alex, was only 4 or 5 years old, skittering around there everywhere. And his other brother, my Uncle Hank, he would occasionally accompany them. Well, between them, they would get salmon. Then they would bring it up to this end of the island, where great-grandma had drying racks. And she was the only one there left, drying thousands of salmon during the summer. You got to remember, our people were driven out of here, and they never felt like it was safe to come back again to fish. He said, so we were feeding all our people up north. Chosh would have her winter dances, and she would put bundles together of 10 fish each, then wrap them up. And when her relatives would come, she would hand them those bundles of salmon from their old home here. That was the reason they were there. That's the reason it meant so much to him. In 1957, he heard that the reservoir was being lowered, and it was the only chance he was going to have to see the entire island again. So he got me up and he put me in the car, and we came down pulling the boat. We got down just north on this side of the river. So we put the boat in and we headed down. And we're almost to the island. And he looks over at me and he goes, you know, we're not supposed to be here. I might get arrested. I looked at him. He said, and if they come to arrest me, you're on your own. You know how to drive the boat. Okay, I know how to do that. I was afraid. We spent about 4 hours. We spent half of that day there. And he looked at the places where all of the things were missing. There was this great feeling of loss that he had, but he knew where everything was. He knew where all those pictures were. He took me down and he showed me where he would take the wagon. He brought a wagon down there. He got a wagon, you know, wheels and stuff, big old buckboard. He got it down there on the island, taking 2 canoes, placing the wheels on each side, putting boards across, straddling it, tying the horses to the back. Then they drifted down. That's how he got the wagon that's a lot of work. But they were hauling hundreds of pounds of fish from that's almost a mile. And if you've ever seen that island, it goes like this, and it's all basalt, and it's broke up. Cindy, my cousin Cynthia, and I were out there. Where's Bill and Sean? Raise your hand. See those guys there? They helped me. They're with the PUD. They got us out to the island. We're the first Indians who've been out there since '57. And that feeling of reconnection. We brought eagle feathers out, we tied them in the trees, and we sang our prayers to them, sang our prayers to our elders. But more than anything, we just reconnected, touched the rocks. To be able to sit there for the first time since 1957 in the exact same spot as Grandpa described, the salmon, the fish coming up through the channels, the thousands and thousands of salmon, and being there again.
Now, Randy is going to share the tale of Red Star Blue Star defeats Spexmen.
In Pascosa world, if you can imagine it, we had our superheroes. We had an entire pantheon of characters, all animals. I don't care how big, how small, were imbued with the spark that the Creator gives us all at birth. We're born with it. Animals first ruled. People we're the last on the land, and we might be the first to go. But people didn't have power, what you would call metaphysical power. We didn't have that yet. Existing in our presence was a giant that was a carryover from not the last world, not the last era, but an era 2-3 times removed, an era of giants, an era of supernatural power and beings. This person, this being, we call Spexman. Spexman can only be described as a giant dragon, a water dragon. He lived at the confluence, in and around the confluence of the Wenatchee, and he preyed upon all the animals. There were vast herds. You have to set the Wayback Machine, Sherman. We're going back 12,000 years when this was a wall of ice here. And then the warm winds hitting it created this huge savanna in which all the animals, the giant animals lived. Mastodons, giant bears. Everything seemed to be big. That's what Spexmen lived on. Then come people. People after the great floods. See, you're not the only one with the big flood. We had a bigger one. After that, Spexman stayed around because he had other animals, the newer animals, the herding animals, the elk, the antelope, the mountain sheep, and one that didn't have feathers, scales, fur, just soft brown flesh, people. He lived off from them. And he did so with impunity because nothing could challenge him. He sat in the river with only those horns sticking above the water and his eye. And sitting on top of one of those horns, or in the middle of his head, was a little bird we call Klikalik, little falcon. Every morning, that bird would rise into the air, and it would hover. You've seen them out there hovering. They're one of the only birds that'll hover in one spot. And he would scan the horizon for any animals to feed his overlord, because he did the bidding for Spexman in fear that he would be destroyed. Well, it was during this time. There was a great celebration. There was a great celebration amongst the people, the two-leggeds. And everybody came, all of the animals, all the animal people. Shmia'au, Sara'ra, Stamert. They all came. That was cougar, bear, coyote. They all arrived for this great celebration. They were celebrating the birth of twins. And if you know anything about Native Americans, we have the lowest percentage of twins on Earth. They were unheard of until we started messing with our neighbors. And there they are, the twins. Red Star and Blue Star. They say they were brought here from the Star people, brought them down. Well, it's this great celebration. Everybody is dancing, everybody is singing, they're gambling, they're playing what you call a stick game, lahal. They were gambling, playing, and in came the salmon people, cast a spell over them, the dog salmon people. They were powerful sorcerers, powerful. They cast a spell over everyone and put everybody into a trance. And while they were in the trance, they came, took the twins, and replaced them with rotting bark. And so they ferreted them out. Oh, a few minutes later, the party started again, and Grandma's sitting there shaking her babies, only to realize my baby looks like rotten bark. Oh my. And the party ends. Meanwhile, the twins have been squirreled away down into an area we call Nchah, Moses Coulee. Da 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 da. In this cave, they were raised in darkness. They were secluded away. And their foster parents, their adopted parents, kept them way in the back. During this period, they're visited by animal people, because Coyote had told everyone that they had to prepare. They had to prepare and make way for Skint, for man who is coming, us. See, before that, we were kind of just like little creepy little things that crawled, we were grubbers. We had no power. We were scavengers. And so the animals never feared us. We were kind of disdained, I think. Well, in that cave, every night, another person, another either two-legged, four-legged, winged, would arrive and sing to them and talk to them. What they were doing is they were surrendering their power. They were teaching these twins their power songs, their shomach. They were giving it to them. They were giving it to them in preparation for a great event that was going to come. Little by little, the twins grew. Every night, same thing. Mole came in, told them about the plants and about the stone. They were taught how to make stone implements. They were taught what was the hardest stone. And the littlest ones, like Shrew, Pygmy Shrew, who thought he had nothing to offer because he's only that big and weighs about as much as a penny. I've got nothing to offer, but he does. He might be only that big, but he'll eat things that are that big. He'll eat voles, mice. They'll even take on rats. They're only that big. And how do they do it? They're poisonous. Their bite is poisonous. So the twins learned. They learned from the Shrew that you didn't have to be large if you're potent. You know what you're doing. As the years progressed, they absorbed more and more of this knowledge. Finally, at appointed time, and appointed time, by that I mean Coyote is already waiting outside in front here. Coyote, Quasquai, Blue Jay. Blue Jay's job, the big mouth, is to go and tell everybody. Go and tell everybody. So tell a Blue Jay something. The twins are brought closer every day and closer to the light. Finally, they realize the light for the first time, and they see that. But more than that, they see for the first time, not just mangy Coyote, they see who their parents are. Their parents are ants. They've been raised by ants. The ant people have raised them. And Coyote very quickly tells them, thank you, ants, bye. Twins, we have got a greater purpose. You have a greater purpose. And he explains to him who Spexman is. They go up onto the hills and they're able to look down and see what a Spexman was. Much greater than they thought. So they devise a plan. A plan on how they are going to conquer. You cannot kill something like this. This is the greatest creation of the Creator that he's ever created. This is power. If we know anything about power, you can't destroy it. You just change it. So their decision is to come down. First of all, they have to talk to the little buddy, the lackey, Tlick-Lick. So Coyote beckons Tlick-Lick. Of course, nobody's interested in eating Coyote. And so Tlick-Lick goes over and Coyote tells him, why do you do his bidding? And he says, well, she says, if I don't, Spexmen will wipe out my entire people. Well, if we can free you, if I can free you, if I can promise to free you from his grip, will you help us? Will you help us in overcoming Spexmen? He agrees. So it's not so important about what Tlick-Lick does, it's what he doesn't do. he doesn't alert Spexmen. As the twins come down on each side of the river, they ride the logs down until they're across the river with Spexmen in the center. They're across the river from each other. Now becomes the game of cat and mouse. Click Click flies into the air and announces that there's people, there's a soft person standing over there mocking him. Spexman rises to see this young man standing on the shore, drops into the water and slowly glides like a gator under the water, then rises to spring upon him, only to find the boy is gone. The boy has learned from all his teachers how to hide, how to camouflage himself. And across the river, Spexman hears this holler. He hears the scream. And across the river, he sees Red Star standing on the other side. Oh, boy, he's fast. He drops into the water, slides across, lifts out of the water, only to find no one again. And again, from across the river, he hears the sound. He looks over, and there on the other side is the boy. I've got a fast one. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth throughout the day. Finally, one of them makes a move on Spexman and drives home one of these beautifully shaped stone points on a spear thrower you call an addle-addle. And those points are what you've come to know as the Clovis points. They were the hardest stone, the only thing that could cut through the belly of Spexman. So one of them is thrust into Spexman, wounding him. He screams in pain. And like an elemental that he is, he starts swimming up the river and doesn't stop there. He moves into the land and takes on the body or the chemical, the mineral, and becomes one with the soil and starts swimming through the soil, coming out at Ribbon Cliff, screaming up the sides, and his blood can be seen on Ribbon Cliff as he tears up the cliff, goes into the rock again, erupting from the top, came out where the top is, the very top there, Nahoit. He shoots out of there, comes down into the river, explodes into the river. And he's finding with all this, as he's using and drawing more energy, he's growing in size. And he can't keep up this battle with the extra volume he's put on. So he snaps off the back of his tail, and it becomes, at Knapp's grade, that's what they call, Goosetail Island. That's Spexman's tail. Moves down to find that boy again. And it's only when he gets down river, that he realizes that he's actually battling twins for the first time. He realizes, because now they have him. He's weakened. No tail, he's been injured. They spear his eye, and that actually is what caused him to go up to Ribbon Cliff, was his eye had been sliced. He comes back one-eyed, looking for them. That's when he turns his greatest power. He spins out of the water. He spins, turning into a whirlpool, a water spout, then turns into gas, into a cloud. And from that cloud, he comes back, he strikes back as lightning, hitting the earth. He comes back up again, and the twins stand their ground for the first time. They don't budge. And so he draws in air. He's going to incinerate them. And as he's drawn in air, he hears this familiar sound, but he doesn't know what it is. And it's bothering him. Chum-pum-pum. Little red hummingbird is right in his eye. And with one eye, he's battling, trying to see as that thing keeps attacking him. And finally, he escapes from the hummingbird and starts drawing in air again. And he hears this sound, this beautiful sound. And he looks up to see his friend Click-Click above him. And Click-Click is diving. Click-Click, arrow from the light. Click-Click, sparrowhawk. Click, Dragon Slayer. He hits the last eye Spexman had, ripping his eyeball. From there, Spexman sinks into the water, into the river, and he's turned to stone. If you go up Stemilt, that's his backbone. They divided him up. All of the animals came together and they divided him up. They split him up. And to the south became the people of the Chinook, the Molala. Over to the other side became the Umatilla, the Nez Perce. To the center in the south became the Wishkam, the Warm Springs people. To the north, his paws were taken. They became the people of the Kutnat, the Kootenays, Shuswap. To the other side, the Thompson people. To the head of the lake, his head was sent to the head of the lake, became the people of the North Okanagan. His heart became Rock Island. Their job done, or that job done, they lifted themselves. They become the brown bear, Stemstamelt, Michal, the black bear. And they look out over their people, the Wenatchee people now, as Saddle Mountain, Saddle Rock. Even the smallest being can change the entire world, the shape of the world, the events of the world. Never rule out what you're part of this great puzzle called life. You're all part. Your story is as vital as theirs is. You're a piece of the puzzle. And without that piece, that puzzle is incomplete. That picture is incomplete. Thank you, folks.
And that was Randy Lewis with the tale of Red Star Blue Star defeats Spexmen. You can pick up a copy of the book at the Wenatchee Valley Museum's gift store. Thanks again to the Native River Fund of the Wenatchee Valley Museum and Cultural Center for making this possible. You've been listening to Voices of the Methow, an off-the-wall production. Until next time, thanks for listening.